This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Friday, January 8th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of coronavirus, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in West Africa, where a United Nations team is on the ground in Niger Friday, following one of the worst attacks in the country's recent history, in which more than 100 people are believed to have died. Neka Chile has the details.
A United Nations team has arrived in Niger after more than 100 people were killed in attacks on two villages. Witnesses said over 100 armed assailants on motorbikes had arrived at the communities in the Tillaberi region on January 2nd and fired indiscriminately. The violence in the western region of Niger, where Islamic militants have carried out a series of attacks, has forced survivors and the populations of 4 neighboring villages to flee the area. On Wednesday, Staffan Dujarric, spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, said the UN interagency mission has arrived in the town of Wellum on Tuesday to assess the situation for displaced people.
According to the mission's findings, about 10,600 people have been displaced, and a majority of them found refuge in Mangai's village with host families who are already vulnerable.
The UN team will support Niger's government in providing emergency assistance, Dujarric said. The killings are the worst in Niger's recent history and highlight the fragile security in the country ahead of a presidential runoff in February.
Neka Chile of Reuters filed that report. At least 3 people have been killed after a boat capsized on Democratic Republic of Congo's Lake Kivu, but there are varied reports over the number on board. It is also unclear how many are still missing. Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori has more.
At least 2 children and 1 woman have drowned after a boat capsized in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with survivors warning that dozens more are still missing. The passenger boat sank on Lake Kivu overnight on Tuesday, with survivors warning that dozens more are still missing. The passenger boat sank on Lake Kivu overnight on Tuesday, and according to a regional government spokesman, had set off from an illegal mooring in the dock and was overloaded. The spokesman says the boat had 51 people on board, of which 46 had been rescued, 3 had died, and 2 were missing. But survivor Kisigwa Ombeni says the number of passengers was much higher.
The boat was really overloaded. There were about 250 people without counting the children. There were those who were travelling with 2, 3 or 4 children.
Other survivors, who were rescued by local boatmen, gave estimates ranging from 100 to at least 250. Deadly boat accidents are common in Congo, which has very few paved roads and where vessels are frequently loaded well beyond their capacity. Vincent Makori, VOA News.
Nurses in South Africa are reporting that some patients are being forced to sleep on the floor, along with full morgues and a lack of adequate personal protective equipment as they battle COVID-19. David Doyle reports.
It's a matter of choosing who to save or who not to save. It's not nice.
Rich Sitsino works on the front line of South Africa's battle against COVID-19. With infections now at more than 1 million, driven by a more contagious variant, he and other nurses say they can't cope.
In my facility, there's a patient who died in a tent because the wards were full. And there's nothing the hospital management could have done, by the way.
He and other representatives of the Young Nurses and Indaba Trade Union describe grim conditions in South African hospitals, including patients sleeping on the floor and morgues that are full.
Our communities must prepare to die and die in numbers.
Portia Maseko is a nurse at LERATONG Hospital. She says they are still being given substandard personal protective equipment.
I'm telling you, as it is right now, I would never encourage any of my kids to be either a doctor or a nurse, because that is suicide in South Africa.
The country has recorded the highest number of coronavirus infections in Africa at 1.15 million, or about a third of the continent's total. This week, deaths surpassed 30,000, and Health Minister Zweli Mkhize said hospitals were struggling to manage the influx of patients.
Body bags on the floor.
Young Nurses Indaba President LERATONG Mtunzi says the country needs a stricter lockdown.
Nurses are demoralized, they are burned out, and they are just dragging themselves, as they are the only people that we are currently relying on. Doctors, nurses, healthcare support staff, all equally are really in a bad state.
Mkhize has said South Africa will vaccinate 40 million people, or two-thirds of its population, in order to achieve herd immunity, though health workers have also voiced concerns that authorities have not acted fast enough to secure the required vaccines.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. New strains of the coronavirus causing the COVID-19 pandemic are evolving, raising alarms with public health experts. The viruses appear to be more infectious, making them harder to control. But many experts say the new vaccines against them should still work. VOA Steve Baragona reports.
The streets of London have gone quiet again. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson put the nation under lockdown after a new variant of the coronavirus emerged.
It's clear that we need to do more together to bring this new variant under control.
In South Africa, another strain has doctors worried, says University of KwaZulu-Natal epidemiologist Tulio de Oliveira.
It has been dominating almost every infection that we have in the coastal area. This is from Eastern Cape all the way to Cape Town.
The UK strain has spread to at least 39 other countries. The South African variant has turned up in another 9. Both seem to be driving their countries' surges in infections. But scientists cannot say for sure yet, says Johns Hopkins University immunologist Andrew Pekosz.
That really needs to be investigated in other countries to see, is this just something that happened in England for a confluence of other reasons? Or is this something that is really specifically associated with this virus? And if it is, then we should be seeing that in other countries.
Okay. The variants do not appear to make people any sicker, but the increase in cases will likely mean more hospitalizations and more deaths, Pekosz says.
If you simply have a virus that can infect more people, then the total number of people go up and all of those other parameters go up as well, too.
The new mutated viruses have appeared just as vaccines to fight the pandemic begin to arrive. But the vaccines should still work, says the British government's chief scientific advisor, Patrick Vallance.
When a vaccine is given, you don't just make one antibody against one bit. You make lots of antibodies against lots of different bits. And so it's unlikely that all of that would be escaped by any mutation.
Tests are underway to make sure. Viruses mutate all the time, and the vaccines eventually will need to be updated. But that's easier than ever, Pekosz says.
Particularly these mRNA vaccines have the potential to really quickly be updated to whatever is circulating.
Both the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna vaccines are this type. If the new strains take over, these vaccines may allow for quick adaptation to an ever-changing virus. Steve Baragona, VOA News.
When Helio Leiva was forced to close down his quesadilla stand in Los Angeles because of the COVID pandemic, he thought he had lost everything. But instead of giving up, he found a way not only to stay on his feet, but to help and feed the community hit hard by the crisis. Ginia Dullo has the story.
Helio Leiva opened his quesadilla stand in East Hollywood in 2019, and within weeks it became incredibly popular. But when the coronavirus pandemic struck in mid-March, accompanied by lockdown measures, Leiva was forced to shut down. Without income, Leiva had no money to pay the rent, and his family faced eviction. That's when Leiva decided he had nothing to lose and started a GoFundMe account.
It was such an emergency because if we didn't pay the rent that month, we would be, technically homeless because we didn't have no food. We had no, it was catastrophic. But the reaction to the public to our GoFundMe was so great, and since they donated like 7,000 or 5,000 initially, and so we have like a couple of rents now. And so we felt that through that, we had a sort of like a commitment to pay back the community because people love what we were doing, and so we started going more into doing more cookouts.
Next, Leva reached out to a newly formed Instagram group, Los Angeles Community Fridges, and set up a neighborhood refrigerator. Anyone could leave food in that fridge, and anyone in need could help themselves. Leva himself started cooking free lunches once a week. With the help of volunteers, the lunches are distributed to the needy.
What's better than a hot meal? You know, I know personally when I'm not feeling well, if someone drops some soup over to me, like, not only does it warm my body, but it does warm my spirit. You know, it's one less thing that I have to think about.
Today's menu is fried chicken or beef with rice, salad, avocado, and cheese. Since Leva started organizing these community cookouts, he has made over 3,500 hot meals for those who need them. He admits it's impossible to help everyone, but he is doing what he can.
All the things that people are experiencing with COVID, such as, you know, isolation and not being able to talk to your neighbor and distrust and hate towards the government and all that kind of stuff. When people wait in line and then they get this food, it's just this kind of beacon of hope. And people smile and then they have, you know, such a thankful experience, you know, getting food here. So that's what it is. It's more about that hope that we give to people to go through the next day, you know.
Jenya Dulo for VOA News, Los Angeles, California.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, we'll hear from a Ghanaian visual artist who is the 2020 recipient of an international award that honors individuals and organizations for their work in culture and development. We'll be right back.
Is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
Welcome back to Africa 54. The fallout continues in connection with the chaos at the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday. In a video released Thursday night, President Donald Trump said he is outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem that transpired when his supporters stormed the Capitol building. Trump is facing a growing call from Democrats and Republicans who say he must be removed from office. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara reports.
With scenes of his supporters violently storming into the U.S. Capitol fresh in mind, Thursday night President Donald Trump released a video addressing the attack.
Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem.
Trump acknowledged that Congress has certified the election result, but did not congratulate President-elect Joe Biden, as is the norm in a concession speech.
My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
Earlier Thursday, Biden delivered another sharp rebuke of Trump.
He unleashed an all-out assault on our institutions of our democracy from the outset. And yesterday was but the culmination of that unrelenting attack.
Biden did not address the growing calls to remove Trump from office for inciting mob violence, including from presumptive Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who are pushing to invoke the 25th Amendment.
By inciting sedition, as he did yesterday, he must be removed from office. While it's only 13 days left, any day can be a horror show for America.
Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger also called for Trump's ousting.
All indications are that the president has become unmoored, not just from his duty, nor even his oath, but from reality itself.
The 25th Amendment allows the removal of a president who is unable to discharge the powers and duties through a vote by the vice president and a majority of the cabinet. Neither Vice President Mike Pence nor any cabinet member has publicly supported the move.
With the remaining time, I think there would be some obstacles, both practical and legal, to doing it. So it could be done, but it would be very hard to do.
Meanwhile, a federal prosecutor investigating the riot has said he would press charges against anyone inciting it, potentially including Trump, who told supporters to march to Congress to press lawmakers to block certification of Biden's victory. For months, he has said he can only lose if the election is rigged.
The images are shocking and sad, and I think the unfortunate but somewhat predictable conclusion of the president's denigration of democracy.
Pelosi said that if Pence won't invoke the 25th Amendment, the House would consider impeaching Trump again. He was impeached in late 2019, but acquitted by the Senate in February 2020. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
One day after a mob breached the U.S. Capitol building, sending legislators into a lockdown, lawmakers are outraged and security is increasing. VOA's Caroline Presutti reports from Capitol Hill, where she spoke with some of the pro-Trump crowd who still lingered after Wednesday's chaotic scenes.
A day later, a new fence to stop anyone else from assaulting the U.S. Capitol building. A day later, police lining the streets. A day later, quiet and calm. Unlike yesterday. That's Trump supporter Paul LeBlanc behind the camera. He was on the Capitol balcony, a place normally prohibited to the public. He says he remained outside as mobs forced past police and breached the Capitol halls and chambers, where legislators evacuated just minutes prior. But LeBlanc is unapologetic and continues to believe without evidence that the election was rigged.
I say what the government's doing is an attack on our freedoms. This wasn't an attack on democracy. This was people that are fed up.
I found myself on the awning over there.
Liam McGowan says he saw no one stop the pro-Trump crowd.
They just let people walk right past them.
McGowan, who went to the Capitol out of curiosity Wednesday, says Capitol Police were outnumbered. D.C. police and the National Guard restored order, but only after the mob had roamed the building, vandalizing offices. Dozens were arrested.
All I know is that if the Black Lives Matter protests happened like this over the summer, then there would have been a bloodbath, and that's not what happened.
Jeff Seymour was there to support the president, but he says he left before the crowd got violent. He did not support invading the Capitol and urges Republicans and Democrats to talk. When asked what advice he would give the new president,
sit them down at a round table and say, hey, let's work this out like adults. We're all mature here. We're not little toddlers. We're not kids.
Caroline Mitchell lives within a block of the Capitol, where today life is normal. She is not worried about another attack.
I don't think they're going to have the balls to come back down here and act like they did yesterday.
Congress is adjourned until next week. The nation's capital has extended its public emergency for 2 weeks, until after the inauguration of Joe Biden as president on January 20th. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Washington.
World leaders are expressing shock and dismay at the U.S. Capitol riots in Washington Wednesday that resulted in at least 4 deaths and dozens of arrests. Supporters of President Donald Trump marched on Capitol Hill after Trump called for protests against the victory of his rival, Democrat Joe Biden, in November's election. U.S. courts have repeatedly rejected Trump's claim that the vote was rigged. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
European allies watched with dismay as the violence unfolded at the U.S. Capitol Wednesday.
What happened today in Washington, D.C. is not America, definitely.
This democracy is stronger than the attackers and the rioters.
On Twitter, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson called the violence disgraceful. His Interior Minister Priti Patel blamed President Donald Trump.
His comments directly led to the violence, and so far he's failed to condemn that violence, and that is completely wrong.
NATO's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg tweeted, "Shocking scenes in Washington, D.C. The outcome of this democratic election must be respected." A spokesman for the United Nations Secretary-General said it is important that political leaders impress on their followers the need to refrain from violence. Israel's leader expressed support for his country's chief ally.
American democracy has always inspired me. Lawlessness and violence are the opposite of the values we know Americans and Israelis cherish.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote on Twitter, "The democratic process cannot be allowed to be subverted through unlawful protests." Meanwhile, US rivals taunted Washington. In a televised speech, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said it showed how fragile and vulnerable Western democracy is. In a statement, Venezuela said the United States is suffering the same thing that it has generated in other countries with its policies of aggression. China attempted to twist the narrative.
The mainstream media in the United States have unanimously condemned this as a violent incident, using words like thugs, extremists, villains, and disgrace. However, what words did they use to describe the violent protesters in Hong Kong? They said it was a beautiful sight and profiled violent protesters as democratic heroes and said that the American people stand with them.
Moscow's deputy UN ambassador, Dmitry Polyansky, compared the violence to the 2014 revolution in Ukraine, writing on Twitter, quite Maidan-style pictures are coming from DC. US allies share the pain of many Americans watching the violence at the heart of its democracy. Many foes are using the events as an opportunity to settle scores. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Every year since 1997, the Prins Claus Fund, named in honor of Prince Claus of the Netherlands, presents a handful of international awards to honor individuals and organizations for their excellent, groundbreaking work in culture and development. The 2020 Principal Laureate awarded in December is Ghanaian visual artist Ibrahim Mahama. Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell takes us inside his studio to meet the artist and discover his art.
Hello, Ibrahim.
Hello.
First of all, congratulations on your recent award with as Principal Prince Claus Laureate. How does that feel?
Oh, well, it feels very good for this recognition because when I started building this institution 5 years ago, I wasn't actually thinking about all of this. I was just thinking about creating a space that could allow for art to flourish within the community. So I'm really glad that at least people recognize this beyond this space.
Ibrahim Mahama is awarded for his exceptional artworks and for his social activism, raising awareness and urging us to take responsibility for improving the lives of others.
Tell us about the space you have there in Tamale.
We have actually 3 spaces at the moment. So the first space, which is SCCA Tamale. SCCA literally stands for Savannah Center for Contemporary Arts. It started in 2014 when I started earning money professionally as an artist. So in 2019, we opened the first exhibition there, which was a retrospective of an 80-year-old Ghanaian artist. And the second space is Red Clay, which is literally my studio, but it's an extension of SCCA, which also allows for the exhibitions to be extended here. We have spaces for archives, we have spaces for classrooms, we even have a parliament, which I designed, and a couple of other spaces.
So in what ways are you engaging the community?
The exhibitions that we produce, we produce a lot of workshops and programs around them. So for instance, at SCCA, we invite schools through the education department to come for workshops. At Red Clay, we recently did a series of workshops which actually involved inviting these women from the upper northern parts of Ghana who are known for painting and making these murals on buildings. So they came and worked with the artists whom we're doing the retrospective on to do this mural around the institution. And later also, we worked with local audiences, working with them on how to produce pigments out of local materials. So we engage the community as much as we can in many different ways.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the first time you made money as an artist. So how was it that you made money as an artist the first time?
Well, it was a show which was at the Saatchi Gallery in London, and the institution was acquiring the piece. So when the piece was acquired, the money which I got from the piece was actually the money that I used as seed money to invest in building the first part of the institution. So that was in 2014.
What was that piece?
It was one of the early jute sack installations. So it was this piece which actually wrapped an entire room, and it was literally made up of these cocoa sacks which are used to transport cocoa and later on used to transport charcoal. So I mostly collect the material when they are very much used and like torn and tattered. So I exchange the old bags with the new bags, and with the old bags I sew them together with a network of collaborators, and then we go around the city and the country and we cover these monumental spaces with them. So in London, it was actually covering like the walls of an interior part of a gallery.
Back to the Prince Claus Award real quick. They mentioned that, you know, in general, art and culture is special because it speaks truth. What kind of truth are you saying in these pieces, using sacks and, you know, stuff that normally people do not view as beautiful?
In my work, I address the contradiction of capital and also how labor is constantly being exploited. And the jute sacks are used in carrying like commodities like cocoa across, like from Africa to the rest of the world, which generates a lot of money. At the end of the day, a lot of that money is used then now to fund all kinds of programs. So I was very much interested in somehow using the leftover of the material as a point to be able to make art that somehow allows us to be able to re-examine the material in terms of its beauty and its ugliness. And the revenue that is generated out of it, because once the material goes into the realm of art, the value changes. So then the value that it translates into, which becomes like a new form of money, is what I then now use in building institutions like this, which also plays a different role within the society, which allows maybe children to be able to have access to art in a different way that probably I didn't have as a child growing up.
Ibrahim, thank you very much, and congratulations once again for your award, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you.
That was Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell speaking with Ghanaian visual artist Ibrahim Mahama. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.